Okay, so what are we going to tackle today? You've seen this before. I fixed enough of these. I have enough videos. This is a Commodore SX-64 portable computer. Now, I have a lot of these, as you probably already figured out. But what is wrong with this one? This one is missing this keyboard cable. This original keyboard cable here it's very difficult to find an original one, and when you do find an original one, the few times that they might come up for sale because someone's parting out their computer, they usually go for anywhere from $80 to $100. So what are we going to tackle today? We are going to make our own cable, and we have this as the model. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's go along for the ride. So what do we got to do first? First thing we need to do is make the cases for the DB25 pins. There's a few STL files on Thingiverse, and I looked at them, and I think I found the one that I consider the nicer of all of the ones that I've seen. So I will leave the link in the description, and that's what we're going to be bringing in here. I'm using the smaller 3D printer instead of the larger Creality printer because these parts are relatively small. I had already laid these out a little bit, but I think what we need to do here is I want to change the orientation of these two pieces here. So first thing is first, let's rotate this. $90 degrees. And let's rotate this one as well. 90 degrees. Okay. So that's how I'm going to orient the prints. Let's also move this guy over a little bit here. Okay, so that's how I'm going to orient the prints. I'm going to be using a layer height of 0.16. I normally use 0.20, but I want this to be finer. I'm going to make an infill of 100% because I want these to be sturdy. I don't want to have any hollowness to them. I'm going to add support, and for my support, I'm going to basically touching the build plate. I don't need the supports everywhere. I just need touching the build plate. I think that's pretty much it. I'm going to use PLA. So let's go ahead and generate the G code for this. And I'm going to name it SX-64 cable housing. Okay, now that I've generated that file, I already have my 3D printer here. I use Octoprint for this. So I'm just now going to copy this file over and go ahead and load and print. So for the casings, basically you needed the two DB25 casings for the pins, and then you needed two cases that the DB25 connectors are going to be plugged into. And this is probably going to take a few hours, maybe, I don't know. We'll see what the print time is once it comes up here. Okay, while we're waiting for that, I wanted to point out a couple of things here. I'm going to be using a 34-pin cable because that's what I have handy. It's a lot thicker than the original cable, but that 34-pin cable diameter matches pretty close to the opening on these cases that we're making. I took a measurement of them and it's pretty darn close, so that's going to work out rather well. The other is it's a 25-pin through cable. In other words, the pins go from one pin to the other, 1 to 1. But I just want to also point out, you don't need all 25 wires. If you get a 25 pair, if you get a 25 wire cable, this only uses 23 of the 25 wires. So just so you know. So anyways, so that's what we're going to do. Let's see where we're at with this printing here. All right, so let's see where we're at here. So we're already starting to print. This isn't giving me the time left, but I'm gonna figure that this is probably gonna take a few hours to print. So we're gonna let this go and do its thing, and then I'll come back when the cases are done and show you how to clean them up, and then we can start wiring. So stay tuned. Okay, we could have opted to use the Pro, but this is such a small footprint that we decided that, well, I decided that using the smaller printer would be a lot nicer, easier. So this is where it's at right now. It's creating the supports. So we'll check back on this in a few hours, and hopefully we'll have some really nice pieces to show off. Okay, so here we've got our 3D printed pieces. So the next thing we need to do here is cut out the supports. And it should be pretty simple to do. Now, because I did this vertically, these little tabs on the side might be kind of fragile, so gotta be careful with those. Okay, like this one's kind of messed up already, but really you don't really need the tabs. They help, but we're going to end up super gluing this onto the body. So don't fret if your little tabs snap off. Okay, so first things first, let's get rid of these supports. And they should just peel off really easy. And then we'll just file this down so it's nice and smooth. Giving it a little bit of a head start here. And then we're going to get a small drill to make sure that these holes aren't clogged up. So the holes should fit the pin, and the pin should slide in kind of snugly. snugly. And then there's a little bit of a recess on the top where it'll just slide right into the recess. So I'll show you how that looks. Okay. I'll leave a link to Mauser where you get these, where you get the pins. If I could get this bag open here. So that's what the pins look like. And you can see there's this little piece right here is what's going to kind of slide in. So the pin's going to go in like this. And this piece right here goes into the recess and it just stops right there, keeping the pin from going all the way in. And we're going to use a crimper to crimp the wire onto the pin. So basically, these holes are already a pretty decent fit. I'm just gonna drill them out just to get any gunk out from inside them, but you can see how that pin just hits the bottom right there. And so that's going to be the clearance. This one's here pretty easy. Okay. Not much cleaning needed on this one. So this came out really nice and clean. Okay, now this one has a little bit of supports that go a little bit deep inside. So this one's going to be a little bit trickier, but these supports should pop out pretty easy once you get a good start on them. Okay, so now we have the inside here. There we go. And we got the support down towards the end there. Just slide right out just like an accordion. There we go. That's it. Nice and clean. And the inside's clean as well. These supports come out so nice and easy. Okay, so I think we can get started on setting up the wiring now. So let me clean this mess up here and we'll get on to the next steps. Okay, so we're gonna do this guy first. So our wiring. So I already stripped the wire I'm going to use. Like I said, this is 34 wires. I only need 23. But we're going to go ahead and just do a full 25. It's just easier. So I also have 2 pieces of shrink wrap. One's going to go on this end here to help hold the, on this end here to help hold the cable. And then the other shrink wrap is going to be on this end here to help hold the cable. And we're also going to super glue the cable on to keep it in place in case you pull the cable, it doesn't come out. So let's go ahead and do that. So first thing I'm going to do is start stripping these. Now the wires here go all the way towards the end of the pins, so I'm just going to strip them all so I can crimp them, the bare wire here. So I'm going to take about that much off with the stripper. But before we do, we have to route this through here. There's a bend, a 90-degree bend here that needs to be dealt with. So you kind of have to help guide the wires a little bit. Okay, I think I got all the wires there. Push through pretty well. And there is enough room in the back underneath to push these wires through to where I don't need to cut them all at an angle to make shorter wires on this end and longer wires to reach this end. I can keep them all pretty much the same length. And I can just bunch the wires in as I need to. So I'm just going to cut them enough to where I have enough room to pull some of this wire out from the back, because this is pushed in as far as it'll go right now. And the nice thing about this 34 wire cable is that it fits snugly into the hole here. Really nice and snug already, so that's pretty cool. So let's start. Okay, now that we've stripped them all, I'll cut the extra ones that we don't need later. I stripped them all just in case we messed something up and we needed an extra pair of wires here. So let's go ahead and start crimping these. Okay, so no soldering. We're just going to go ahead and crimp them all, and then once we put the pins in, we'll super glue. We'll add some super glue to hold them down, and then we'll add super glue all along here, maybe even cover it with epoxy, so that way the wires stay stationary. They don't get pulled out for whatever reason. So all right, so we got a lot of crimping to do here. So let's keep this going. Okay, so the next thing I did here, I put one cable in already, but I stopped myself when I realized I wasn't recording it, is I took this small Dremel bit and basically just cleaned out all the holes. Okay, I drilled out all the holes in here, and I don't know what size bit this is. What I did is I have a whole bunch of these small, very thin bits, and I took the one that just fit snugly in to one of the holes that was already there. So I'm not making the hole any larger. I'm basically using the same size bit and then as the hole. And then basically what I did is I put one pin in there, and it should be really snug. Not really snug, it should be kind of snug, but it should be snug enough to where it stays in place and it doesn't pop out. And it should be snug enough where you have to use like a little screwdriver or something to push it in all the way. And the recess here, you see how this is a little bit thicker? You know, right here, that fits into this little recess that's already there, and it fits snugly in there. So I can't pull this pin out. Okay, so we'll do all the rest of the pins here, and we'll super glue the thing on, the pins in place so they don't move, so you can't push them in. And just note that the cable is a straight through cable. So notice the geometry of this and the pin settings. So on this side, this pin will match this pin. This bottom pin will match this bottom pin. So all the cables should match, and you can see here where the gaps are, where there's a pin that's not in play there, and there's another one that's not in play there. So you can see that's how cable goes through. And note the alignment. This longer part on the top goes to where this 90-degree angle is. The smaller part goes on the bottom. Okay. Now on the other side, since this is square, you know, you don't have to worry about top or bottom, but on this one you do, because this is going to slide into the computer this way. And if you don't have this correct, it's not going to work. Okay. So again, look at the geometry. The pins should, the wires should match the pin. So use a tester. Okay, you'll hear the tone when I hit these. Okay, so that's, the wires go straight through and in that configuration. Make sure you test after you put a couple of pins in, just to make sure you got it right. Okay, all right, so I'm going to put the rest of these pins in here, and I won't bore you with that, and we'll come back when I wrap this up and we're ready to super glue the pins in place. So stay tuned. Okay, I think we are good. So what we're going to do now is super glue, and then we'll cut these ones out here. Okay, so we got some epoxy, some super glue, some instant set for the super glue. Let's get some of this glue in there right now on a couple. These will help set the pins right now, but then we'll epoxy this up. I think we're good there. Then okay, got some epoxy in there. We're gonna now get some of this catalyst in there. This will instantly set the super glue we just put in here. So we can let this sit till tomorrow. Call it a night tonight. All right, so now that the super glue has dried, I'm gonna go ahead and start cutting some of these off, and then we're gonna fill this with epoxy. So let's go at this. Make sure I cut the right wires. Don't want to get myself in a jam here. So now let's go ahead and fill this with epoxy here. If you ever need coffee, highly recommend Dutch Bros. Now normally I will let this sit for about a minute to kind of firm up a little bit, but I don't want it firm. I want it to kind of find its way into all the little crevices in here. So I'm going to start putting it on now. So I think we will let that sit for a while and we'll come back to this in a few hours here. Okay, I think we're ready to put this thing together. So we've got our nice epoxied connector here. It's looking really good. So I want to make sure that it's positioned the right way, for one. Okay, we'll file this down to make it look a little bit nicer, but at least we got this in. Hopefully we didn't damage any wires along the way. We're gonna have to do another continuity test on it. But while we're at it, so we don't pull this out even with a shrink wrap, go ahead and add some super glue here. Okay. All right. So that's that side, and we'll fill these holes here with epoxy. Okay, so now that we got this side done, it's time for the other side. So let's go ahead and okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to strip all of these wires, and then not all of them are used, so we're going to tone out all the wires to eliminate the ones that aren't used, and that way we can cut those out and not have to crimp a connector to it. Now, obviously, I could have eliminated my burden in doing this if I would have just kept track of the colored pairs, but I didn't do that, so now I'm going to pay the price by having to go through this. And if this was a 25 wire cable, I wouldn't have to go through this either. So this is just kind of like an unnecessary step if you do this properly and get the right cable. Okay, so let's now start stripping these wires here. Okay, so that takes care of stripping all of these things. And don't want to forget putting that in. Forgot to do that. Okay, so keep in mind that it's 1-to-1, so the pin here is going to match this one and go to the pin here. So we're going to tone out these to make sure that we got the right pins started here. So let's go ahead and just start by toning this guy. Let's zoom out a little bit here. Okay. We're going to go ahead and tone this guy here. I'm going to find within the bunch here where this guy's at. And that'll give us a start. Really what we should have done is not put this case on so we could have matched up the colors and saved us some time, but it's okay. Toning should be kind of quick and easy as well. So just so we know where we're starting and we don't lose our bearings here, we're going to go ahead and put this first pin in and start populating that row. So that was this bottom row here, and that's what we're going to do here. We're going to hit the bottom row. Okay, and we'll just double check. Let's make sure we got this right. All right, so now we'll go on to the next one. Okay, we'll double check that one. Okay, so we're just gonna keep going until we get all 25 pins. This is the routine. All right, so That's all the pins, and they all seem to tone out, and we'll tone them out one more time. But what we're going to do now is basically straighten some of these pins out so they are not shorting each other. And then we'll tone it one more time, and then we'll super glue it. And then we'll do the epoxy afterwards. Okay. So I think we're good. So we're going to just tone this out one more time, just to make sure we're all okay, and then we can cut these excess wires off here. All right, so let's go ahead and start toning these things out. Okay, I think we're good. All right, everything tones out, so let's go ahead and put some super glue on that. And since it never hurts to double check, this is the original, an original cable, and you can see that the long left equals the long left here. Okay, so we know that's the right orientation. The bottom long side left should short out with the bottom short left. So here's the bottom short left, and here's the bottom short left here. Okay, that one right there should match this one right here. Okay, double, triple check, because there's nothing worse than putting all this together. You saw how much, time it took. Nothing worse than put it together and find that you got the pins backwards. So, and then we'll just straighten out the pins here once we get the super glue in place. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that right now. And then we'll make that dry really quick with this activator here. So let's go ahead and cut these wires here that we don't need anymore. Be really careful not to clip any of the ones surrounding them. Okay. So we'll just let that settle for a bit, and then we'll get to the epoxy next. All right, so let's do the epoxy here. Now the deal with the epoxy, the reason I do this, because you would think that the super glue holding the pins should be good enough, is because when we're putting this back together, getting some of it on the pins and the wires, you know, and around the wires, we'll keep the wires intact, because if you're moving this around, the wires are really thin and they can just break off the pins. So we're trying to take a preventive measure to prevent that from happening. So that's why I go through this extra step here. Okay, so I think that our epoxy is finished drying now. So before we put this back together, we're going to test this just one more time and make sure that everything is good to go here. Okay, so all of them check out. We're probably going to have to do that testing one more time again after we put this together. So we're going to just basically push this back. There we go. Okay, so let's just get a little bit of super glue in here and tighten this down. We'll get this to dry really quick here. Putting some activator on here. Make it a little bit more. We'll get this to set really quick. Okay, there we go. So that's glued down pretty tight. We'll just do the same for the other side now. Okay, that is pretty solid. And we could have probably sanded it down and pushed it in a little bit more, but it's in there. This super glue is going to hold pretty well, and we can just fill in these little gaps here. That's not an issue. I'm also going to put some drops here on the cable. I think that'll pretty much do it. All right, so now we just need to put this sleeve on here. And let's apply some heat to it. Okay, so there we go, our finished cable. So we can fill in these little gaps a little bit later, but for the sake of this video, we'll just keep it short. We'll just fill that with epoxy or something. But let's just give this one more test here on the meter, and then we'll test it on the SX-64. There we go. All right. Okay. So I think we're now ready to test this cable. Let's see what happens. Knock this out. Okay. Seems like it's kind of snug in there. All right, let's see what happens here. Okay. Oh, nice. Here we go. Get this a little bit of an angle. Set down the brightness here. There we go. All right. So one, two, three. Well, I'll just go across the keyboards here. clear, goes up to the top, clear home, and then we'll test the function keys. Okay, there we go. So everything, all the keys work. I mean, not surprising since we toned out, the pins. The only reason it wouldn't work is if the pins were loosened or if they didn't have enough contact, but obviously everything works. So we can call this a success for sure. So let's disconnect this and recap this, and we can wrap this video up. All right. So here's what we learned. First of all, you saw how this was put together. 3D printed the parts, popped the pins in there. These go in really nice. These pins are just the right size. The 3D prints came out, perfect. No complaints. Yeah, we took the tabs off, but quite honestly, if I would have 3D printed these on the sides instead of up and down like this on the table, I think the tabs would have come out a little bit thicker, more robust, and they could have been used. But nonetheless, since we glued the caps on to these, it's really irrelevant. We just need to plug that hole. In fact, what I might do is revise the 3D drawings to just take out those tabs. So if I had to do this again, which I will, I would take off those tabs off the rendering, and I would fill these holes here so you don't need the tabs, because obviously if you super glue, once you slide the cap on, if you just super glue it down, this is not going anywhere. It's PLA plastic. Super glue just will hold it forever. It'll crack somewhere else before it comes apart at the seams. So the other thing I would do different, outside of changing the renderings up a little bit, and I'll be cleaning these up just a little bit off camera, is not use, I used it's a 36 wire cable, and the reason I used that is because I had it handy. And the nice thing about it is it fit perfectly into the diameter of the cap here, but it's too thick. It doesn't have enough flexibility. Probably could have made it longer. I used the stock cable that comes with the SX-64 as my length, but I really should have made it longer as well. But that's how we learn, right? From the mistakes that we make. So if I had to do it over again, which I will, I have this other cable that I recently bought. Not very expensive. It's like $7. It is a 25 wire cable. So this is just a lot more flexible, and I'll probably give it more length than what it has now. So I have this other set that I made up. The only thing I will make different is I'll probably, like I said before, not use the tabs. In fact, I took the tabs off of these. They just don't have any real use, because even if they worked and they fit in here, they're easily broken off. They're just too thin. So anyways, that's the deal. At least you saw how this all puts together. A crimper. I got these from Mauser. I'll leave this in the description. I'll leave the link to the crimper that you can buy on Amazon as well. You obviously have to have a 3D printer. You have to drill the holes out on this just a tiny bit just to clean them up. But these pins slide in there beautifully, and you just got to remember when you slide them in to make sure you push them all the way in so they're flush. There's a little recess in each of these holes here. So I think that'll wrap it up. So hope you learned something from any of the mistakes I made. Obviously, there's a better way to do this the next time we do this, but for being our first shot, and considering that, You know, you can get a cable for, you know, 20, 30 bucks, whatever, but it's not going to look as good as this. And it's a ribbon cable. So, you know, that's the alternative. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just kind of, I don't know. I just kind of liked the look, you know, keeping it as close to what the original looked like as possible is the thing for me. So there you go. We'll wrap this up. Enough of my rambling. Like I always say, you only live once. Enjoy life. Live every day to its fullest. Peace out.